Okay. Sorry about that little technical difficulty on the introduction. What happened is I had a window open of our YouTube stream, our live stream, and it was interfering. I was hearing myself on a delay. It was kind of really weird.
Nah,
So we've got that taken care of. So
nice.
anyway, so yes, I'm John, and I am your host, and I'm here with Ben, our co-host for My Secular Sobriety. It's a fairly new podcast. We just got started. Oh, well, this is episode 7. So for a couple of months anyway. And the whole idea of this podcast was to really highlight options for people in recovery who are identify as atheist, agnostic, or just in any way secular. In fact, they don't even have to identify as secular. They might very well be religious, but not necessarily want their religion to do with their recovery. And there are options available for people beyond the 12 steps and AA. And I was really hoping that we could highlight those options for people. And Ben, I've known for quite a while. I guess we met back in 2014, and he has participated with me in a lot of podcasts on the other podcasts that I do. And it's just been it's always fun to talk with him. And so I asked him to, co-host this with me because I knew there would be episodes like this where we wouldn't have a guest, and and I need someone else to talk to. So Ben, how you doing?
Pretty good, John. Been enjoying the nice weather here. I'm sure it's been probably even a little bit warmer down there.
Yeah, it is nice. I was actually up in Chicago last week and it was cold as hell. And
Yeah.
so it's nice to be back here. And yeah, it was really nice. Just like sweater weather, like in the 60s yesterday anyway.
Yeah.
And so nice weather for taking the dog for a walk.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, why don't we get started here? I thought maybe it might be good, Ben, just to kind of introduce you. I mean, I had an introductory episode where I talked a little bit about myself. So let's introduce you,
Yeah.
and I'll let you begin.
Sounds good. Well, I've been sober for coming up on 13 years. Let's see. I don't know. I'll give a just brief little recap of it. I drank in high school a little bit, nothing to where it was problematic, but I can look back and say that I really always enjoyed it a lot. And then probably right about early college is when it really became a pretty obvious problem. And like many people, had a little bit of legal problems because of it, life problems as well, just not moving forward career wise, and, just emotional issues. And then I finally got a second DUI in 2007, and that prompted me to take a harder look. And I've been sober since then, actually. So yeah, like we talk about on this podcast, sometime went to AA. Courts asked me to go there, and kind of took a liking to it and developed a sense of community there. And yeah, probably I wasn't super active in service in 12-step communities, but I was definitely active in my home group big time. And I enjoyed my time in
Yeah.
AA, and I still go from time to time. And you and I met at a secular conference for
Mm-hmm.
people that go to 12-step meetings. And at that time, I was growing just very tired of a lot of the things I heard in meetings and just questioning a lot of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really nice to touch base with people who thought like you. And yeah, and gone to secular meetings pretty much since then, off and on. And I don't really go to too many meetings anymore at all. I've
Yeah.
got two young kids, keeps me busy. So yeah, I stay home with the kids right now and have some other business interests as well that I can do from home.
Cool.
But yeah, keeps me busy.
Were you? I know that you went through a religious phase, but was that before you started going to these AA meetings, or was that during that when you first started going?
It
Were
was
you
before,
okay?
I grew up going to church, but I never really believed for myself. It was pretty laid back church. And
Mm-hmm.
in my mid 20s, just like a crisis of what the hell do I want to do with my life finally struck
Right.
me. And I kind of look at it as an offshoot of my drinking problem too, just looking for some direction. And I definitely got very, very religious.
Okay.
I would have told you I was a born again Christian
Yeah.
um, and whatnot, but still drinking. And I think I've said it on other podcasts. It was a dangerous combo.
Yeah. Were
You
you
get
actually
really,
going to a church and everything?
yeah, I was off and on. Like I wasn't a
Mhm.
hardcore church going member. We grew up Methodist, and I went to a
Mhm.
United Methodist church. I don't know.
And that's pretty mainstream.
Yeah, pretty mainstream, pretty laid back. But yeah, I delved hard into the Bible and read it,
I
and
did that.
yeah, it was super.
See, I was like that too. So when I was like 19, I first started having really serious problems with alcohol.
Hmm.
And so I had to leave school, KU.
Hmm.
And so my life was just a mess. I mean, it was just a mess. And so I also started getting into the Bible. I read the Bible and I
Hmm.
really thought that religion was going to be my answer. I guess I must have thought that that was what I guess I knew my older brother had kind of had problems drinking and drugging when he was younger. And he became like really super religious and straightened himself
Hmm.
out and had a decent life. And I thought, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I tried it and it wasn't for me.
Hmm. I
Um,
was pretty hardcore into it for probably like 2 or 3 years.
mm,
And but it was very self-centered, looking back
yeah.
at it. Like it was just about making myself feel like I was doing the right thing, and then holding that over other people in a really judgmental asshole way. It kind of went along with having a drinking problem really well, actually.
Yeah.
But it also created a lot of guilt because I've said it on other podcasts too. I never felt okay about my drinking
Yeah.
my whole life. It was never like, oh, this is what you should do, and people are cool who drink. I always had really conflicted feelings about my drinking, and I think getting religious didn't necessarily help that. Um,
I did too. I almost always had some measure of guilt after I drank,
yeah.
because normally, most of the time, I think most of the time, I would just get trashed.
Hmm.
And sometimes more trashed than other people were getting trashed. And yeah, I just always felt a little bit of shame, but and that got worse over time as I went out into the work world and was trying to get on my own 2 feet and didn't
Hmm.
seem to be able to do it. Um, Mainly because drinking away my paycheck and not being able to function at work, and it's
Hmm.
just on and on.
I was super enabled by my parents. My dad was a physician, so and he had his own issues too. So I think it was
Hmm.
easy for him to just dole out the cash to me and not want to.
See, that's one thing that you had that I didn't have. You grew up with an alcoholic, and
Mhm.
so you saw the worst of alcoholism, through your father. You saw him, passed out and all kinds of.
Yeah, yeah, and it's most people don't think, that a physician could really hold their life together that way. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think he was drinking 24/7, but yeah, it was. I definitely, I've gone to some Al-Anon meetings and meetings for family, and that stuff definitely works for me better than 12-step for the alcoholic. Maybe somebody that would be hardcore in 12-step would say I'm not a real alcoholic because of that, but I definitely know that I'm somebody who shouldn't drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the family stuff definitely works better for me, and that's the side that I'm naturally drawn to. And I think even I went back and got my counseling certification too, and was a drug and alcohol counselor for approximately 4 years. And I enjoyed working with the family a great deal. And
Hmm.
excuse me,
No,
that's
that's
my
all
bread and
right.
butter. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that. I know in my family I grew up with just mental illness in my family, and but that was kind of hidden away and it was
Hmm.
easy to hide from us.
Kind of the
Whereas
same effect, really.
really?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a family secret where people don't talk about
Right.
it, and you're not really supposed to ask about it or talk about it, and everybody keep
Yeah.
quiet about it.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought about that because I was talking to Angela last week and I was telling her about my early time in AA when we'd go out on these 12-step calls, and I would see people in various stages um, of detox.
Hmm.
And I told her, I said, it was good for me to see that so I could understand, the seriousness of alcoholism, just how bad it really was. And she said, some of us don't need to see that. We didn't need to be reminded because we grew up with it. And that was a real kind of a wake up for me. Um, because I didn't grow up with that, and I was like the only alcoholic I knew. So it
Right.
was kind of good to, for me, I didn't go that far. So when I was out there watching people go through some really serious withdrawal, and I saw how painful and horrible it was, it just solidified into my brain that this is definitely, there's definitely a physiological component to it, whether you want to call
Hmm.
it a disease or whatever. And I did not want to go there.
Yeah. Well, my codependence would kick in when I'd go to those things. I had this one guy that was always on and off again, drunk, sober. And I'd go and clean his house up and fold his clothes up
Mm,
and pick up all the piss soaked
God.
clothes and stuff. I look back at that now and I'm like, man. But
Yep.
yeah, it's we and this is some of the beef I have with 12 step. Everybody comes at this from a different place. Some of us had alcoholic families, some of us didn't. Some of us were
Right.
to the point of such physical dependence we went through DTs all the time, and some of us didn't. And
Right.
these stupid purity tests that go on in the room sometimes about who's a real alcoholic or the worst alcoholic or this or that is just annoying.
Yeah. Yeah. That happens more and more, it seems. And there's a string of thought in AA. And I think I find it online more often because I don't really go to any kind of meetings outside of a secular meeting. But there's this line of thought where you're a, to be a pure alcoholic, you have to be the alcoholic as defined in the big book,
Hmm.
and only a spiritual experience can help you. And if you can get sober without a spiritual experience, then you must not be a real alcoholic. It's kind of
Right.
crazy
Oh yeah, AA is
logic.
batting 100% if if you go by that logic. You can rule out
Yeah.
anybody who doesn't need that, then they weren't really.
So that's kind of weird. Now, I guess well, those people exist. I mean, if they're online, they're in a meeting somewhere, right, out there in the
Yeah,
real world.
for
I just
sure.
don't happen to encounter them because I choose not to. I mean, I kind of got to the point where I couldn't stand it anymore, and so I can only tolerate my the secular group.
Yeah.
And I know that you started having problems with it too. Just the hardcore religious nature of the program.
Yeah. Well, I think this isn't even grandiose. I think my presence at certain meetings, people knew how I felt and that I would speak up about how I felt. And again, I feel like I did so in a respectful manner. I would say this is
Yeah.
just how it works for me. But it would change the tone of a meeting sometimes to where everybody would go on the attack about that pure alcoholic or real alcoholic stuff all the time.
Wow.
And
That's kind of weird.
it was annoying. And I do think that's part of the cult like nature of certain meetings. I think where they're going to like chase out or push out anything that doesn't meet the agenda. And I don't think any of that's conscious. I think a lot of it's subconscious.
I do too. I truly do. It's like you from my experience, you just kind of adapt the norms of the group,
Hmm.
and and it's probably a survival mechanism that we just have ingrained in us, that I need these people if I'm going to make it, so I'm going to think and do and say like they think and do and say.
Hmm.
And when I start hearing something contrary to what the norm of the group is, that to me is threatening, and therefore I see it as negative, or
Right.
something along those lines, because I was that way. If I mean, I'm looking back many years ago, even when someone would just question some of the basic tenets that I believed in, I just was more than just uncomfortable with it. I just thought that person was wrong and
Right.
crazy to think that way. It's just, anyway.
It's very
So
it's very tribal. It is very tribal. Or it's like
yeah,
somebody with coronavirus enters your community and you got to
right.
get that out of here. It's like get that diseased thinking out of here. We got to
Yeah.
worry about ourselves. So it makes sense.
But I was also thinking about that also on the other side of it. So you've got the people who are in 12-step programs who are like that, where they think that their way is the only true way. But then you've got this other side where the people are so anti 12 step that they won't even, you can't even have a conversation with them. I mean, it's
Right.
just, it's just, I was thinking about that today because I wanted to reach out to some of these people for the podcast. And I think some of them probably just don't like me, period, if I have anything at all to do with, 12 steps at all. But
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
think.
even that big into it even.
Yeah.
I could take it or leave it. I don't really care. In fact, I've kind of grown away from the 12 steps themselves. I see them as just kind of a nice little framework, I mean, of experiences that we've had. They're just laid out in that weird language. But and most of them just kind of things that you just naturally do, like we talked about before. And I don't think they're like magic where you got to do them to get sober. I'm very laid back about it, and I don't care what people do. In fact, that's one reason I want to do this podcast is I wanted to kind of highlight all the different options that are available to people. So,
Yeah. And I'm with you too, but I'll even catch myself wondering, like, am I just being an AA apologist, or is that part of
oh
having
yeah,
gone to AA meetings that I feel like I always have to defend it? But
I
as you know,
know,
I'm always, even I'll ask you after our podcast, I'll be
I
like, oh,
know.
was I too hard on it, or am I being too bashing? And everybody will be like, no, you weren't at all. But
Yeah, I know. We're afraid to bash. We call it bashing, but it's not really. It's honest criticism based upon our experience. And I don't hate anything. I'm not like I'm not really anti anything other. Well, I am anti crazy cultish people, but
mhm,
I'm for the most part I really support anything that anyone can do to
right.
get sober.
I suppose it should be no surprise, but it's very much the response of like an alcoholic family system for people to respond that way, to be like, no, no outside voices, no, don't
Mm,
question how things work here. You don't bring that up.
mm,
It very much fits with that pattern of growing up in an alcoholic home.
yep.
And so it's no shock that a 12-step community kind of responds in that manner too, because everybody's
Yep.
been conditioned. Most people that go there have been conditioned to react that way.
Yep. Well, that makes sense. So anyway, so back in 2015, I started that website AA Beyond Belief, about all
Hmm.
that, and then we did the started a podcast there, and that podcast is actually doing really well. That was my first introduction to podcasting, and what was so unique about that is like we had an audience like right from the beginning. We had that little niche, and the podcast really took off, and I never have any problem getting guests. There's plenty of people who download it from all over
Hmm.
the world. It's really something else. So I assumed that that this podcast would be almost just as easy. I'm finding it a little more difficult.
Yeah.
We've had some guests, but it's not easy to get these guests. I think I can reach out to some of the people that some of the authors and so forth that I had on the other podcast that might like to join us. But
Mhm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts about this podcast and what direction we can take it?
Well, I'm willing to be along for the ride wherever you want to go, but
Yeah.
I understand that too, that not as many, I think the word secular, most people not even sure what it means sometimes. And I think sometimes it's easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you go away from a 12-step community, you just want to get away for as far away from it as possible. But
Yeah.
it can be tough that way. But and then AA too and 12-step community has that built-in obligation of service. So if you're sharing your story or talking about it, you feel like you're being of service.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. It can be tough. You know me. I always that's another thing about me. I love films and the way
Yeah.
you can use those to discuss a topic. I think that
Yeah.
wouldn't be bad to bring one of those in here or there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know
We-
our audience is going to be limited for a while until we can
Yeah.
get some
Yeah.
people going. But no matter what, this is the movement of society. Like society
Hmm.
is becoming more secular, good, bad, worse, otherwise, whatnot. I mean, and
Hmm.
I believe I can't speak for you, but we both still want to do this because it does help people. It
It
helps
does.
us and it can help other people
It
to
does.
let you know that you don't have to throw
Yeah.
the baby out with the bathwater. You can still be sober and not want to have anything to do with 12 step.
Well, I have learned so much from podcasting, not just about, I love everything about it. I mean, I love the technology. I love learning how to do all the audio editing. And now I'm really getting into YouTubing and doing the live streaming. I love that component of it. But I also like what I learn from people who I talk to and having the opportunity to talk to them. That's been, that has really changed me, really. That, and also you do learn some basic communication skills as well. It's just been very helpful to me. It's something I
Mhm.
really enjoy. I think if I wasn't able to podcast about this, I would find something to podcast about. I don't know.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I have some people I could reach out to too, and be a little bit more assertive about that as well.
well, I did reach out to a YouTuber. Her name is Katie Lane, and she's a really incredible spokesperson for the Sinclair method. She's got a website called Embody Daily. And you can just check her out on YouTube, Katie Lane, Embody Daily. And I haven't heard back from her on she said that she'd come on the podcast and we were trying to set up a date. I just haven't firmed up the date with her. I'm hoping it'll be next weekend. If
Hmm.
not, then maybe it'll have to be later on in the month. But she has quite an audience. So if, the people who, visit her YouTube channel learn about us, then that'll might help us too. So,
Right.
but I'm not too hung up about all that. As long as we enjoy it and we can find some things to talk about, just let things go where they will go. I was going to ask you, you talked about how most people don't know what secular means, or a lot of people don't know what secular means. David Bull, who we had on, and the author of Parallel Universes, he gave me some advice early on. He said, stay away from the words atheist and agnostic. He says they're
Hmm.
too politically charged. Do you think that they really are? Do you think atheist is a bad word, or it has a negative connotation?
Yeah, around here I for sure do. But I think amongst people who are atheists or agnostics, it doesn't so much. So maybe if that's our target market, for lack of a better word, there's nothing wrong with using those words.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but around here for sure, like even if I would say to somebody, I try to be honest about what I believe or not believe if it comes up when I'm talking with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like the other day, I was talking with someone and I was asking him about, he had moved to town here, and I was asking him about, I could tell by what he was saying and being service minded that he was probably a religious gentleman. And I said, well, how have you found the faith community around here? Has it been difficult to find a church and whatnot? And he said, no, it hasn't at all. And, I was just using good listening and people skills and trying to, and then he said, oh, why, what church do you attend? And I said, well, I don't, I'm a non-believer. I guess some people would say atheist. And then as soon as I mentioned the word atheist, you could just kind of see on his
Yeah,
face, like, wow.
yeah.
So sometimes I'll be more careful and use the word non-believer, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like you and I have talked about, there's so many ways to look at it. To me, it's two different questions. Agnostic means I don't believe it's knowable to know whether there's a God or not. And atheist means I don't have a belief in a God. It doesn't mean
Right.
I know there's no God, but I don't have a belief in that.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not even disbelieving. It's just that I don't have that belief. That fits me so perfectly. I mean, that's always what I've been. I think there's been times in my life when I have tried to believe and found that I couldn't.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking, well, there must be something wrong with me because I can't believe like other people believe, and I
Hmm.
thought maybe it's because I don't have this background of going to church. I don't know enough about religion. But it just turns out there's something about me that just finds it almost impossible
Hmm.
to have a faith in some God. I just don't.
Hmm.
I can't do that. So that's me. I just lack any belief. It's not that I. It's like, how can you disbelieve in something that you know? I guess you
Right.
can. I guess it's a disbelief too. I don't know.
Well,
But
and the
anyway.
truth is, there are so many degrees of belief. You've got my father-in-law who's a devout Catholic who believes in all the rites and rituals, and it's almost like the rites and rituals are more his religion than the actual belief that is involved
Mm-hmm.
in the religion. And then you've
Mm-hmm.
got people like me who grew up Methodist who just think, oh yeah, we're just nice people, and we go and we shake hands, we have coffee and donuts, and we all sit at church and sing these
Yeah.
old hymns. And then you've got, so there's all degrees of belief. My
Mm-hmm.
wife was talking with one of our daughter's friends' parents, and they were taking their daughter to a preschool that was at a church, but they didn't think it was very religious, or they were told it wasn't. And then their 4-year-old is just getting told all these Bible stories all day long. They were told that it was more education than it was biblical stuff.
Hmm.
So now they're bothered because it feels like it's all Bible and no education. So yeah, I mean, there are so many shades of belief, but there are so many people, there are quite a lot of people who are just not willing to if I ask them questions and I talk a little bit further, I think, well, the only difference between me and them is that they can't jump over to there might not be a God. They have to think, well, there's some reason for all of this. There has to be, or why would this exist or that?
Yeah.
That's the big leap. And I do find that people sometimes just assume that if I don't believe in a God or an acting God or whatever you want to call that, then it means that I think there's no purpose, or that there's no way to find hope or purpose. But
Right.
that's not what I've found in my walk.
Yeah. There's also, I think, a kind of a natural fear of death
Mhm.
and what comes after it. Like, I think nothing comes after it, but, and and I've kind of gotten myself comfortable with that. But if you kind of grow up thinking that, okay, there's a happy existence after this, and I'm going to see everybody and we're going to have a great time. If you kind of grow up with that thought in the back of your mind, and then you kind of realize, no, it's just going to be nothing like it was before I was born. It's kind of unsettling, isn't it?
It
It's
sure
kind
can be. Yeah.
of, it's kind of nice to think that it never ends. That we just go on with another existence.
Right. I
So,
probably could be accused of being pessimistic, but the world can be so hard and so tough and can feel really brutal. And you get social media, and the media and stuff can just exacerbate a person's feelings of dread, that it would be very nice to think that everything's not like that after this is all over. It's like, but then there's a part of me that says too, this thought that paradise or happiness is to be somewhere in this nether world later. It's a way to cope with the fact that we don't feel like we have the power to do what we can to change what we know exists for
right.
sure, the right here and right now. So on some level, just like alcohol can be a negative coping mechanism for people in the world, this here's my judgmentalism against believers. Sometimes belief can be used as that, like a way to
Yeah.
cope with the world and avoid um, the fact that we feel powerless to change the world that exists right here, right now.
Absolutely. It's God's will. So,
Right.
things are going to happen, and there's nothing we can do about it, which
Yeah.
is anyway.
And my mom is a prime example of that. She's somebody who's very much, she utilizes her religion to keep that distance from taking a hard look at that. And I totally get why people do that, because like you said, it's scary. It can be very
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting how, you know, even in recovery from addiction, that religion has made its way, and it's not just AA people. I mean, there's this whole spiritual component behind recovery. If you look at like Tommy Rosen and Recovery 2.0,
Hmm.
he's a very kind of a spiritual kind of a guy. He's not anti anything, but he's very spiritual. And a lot of people in recovery, whether or not they're in a 12-step program or not, they have that very important and spiritual aspect. And I think the way that I understand that there's a need for that is that the change that comes about from going from addict to not using is so dramatic, and it seems like it's very dramatic, and you're doing something that you didn't think you could do. So it seems like it takes on this supernatural quality, and it almost feels that way when you go. I remember when I first stopped drinking, it was like, I swear to God, I would be driving down the road, and it's like I noticed the grass was green and the sky was blue
Right.
and colors. It just seemed like something amazing that just happened. And so I can understand where, if people are having that experience, that they will attribute it to some sort of supernatural, God thing. And
Absolutely. And I think there's a thing called anhedonia, and it's like when you first get sober, everything's just very blah. And then I
mm,
think once your brain starts to heal and all the, more normal chemical reactions come to it, you do start noticing things like that. But then it's
really
also, so yeah, so a lot of people need to be reminded that when they first get sober, you're going to have this anhedonia state where it's like
interesting. I never heard that before. So there's something to
everything,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
everything seems very gray and black. And, obviously your body's adjusting to the fact you're not giving it alcohol all the time too. But even on
Boy.
another level, like you said, it is a perspective change. It's not just chemical. It is the fact you're not so distracted by the fact you're hungover and all you can think about is how
Exactly.
crappy you feel.
Exactly.
Your world goes from being like this to being like just opening up to being more. And 12 step uses a lot of lingo about people being self-centered and selfish. Well, when you're hungover and or drunk all the time, your world does kind of close in like
Yeah.
this. So it would make sense that you seem very selfish and self-centered. So when that perspective opens up and you're not feeling like crap all the time, and you're not so focused on
Hmm.
whatever you may perceive that you need as far as a chemical or not, all of a sudden you can have more empathy or more concern for another person and things like that. And you're making connections with other people and you're feeling more connected to your surroundings.
Yep.
I can see how that does feel like a very spiritual experience.
Yep. Boy, it just I'm just kind of I remember that, like, during that first year of sobriety, and I would be able to do things like you said, because I'm not hungover now, and I could, like, read the paper in the morning, and
Hmm.
just that something simple like that, I would think back to, like, boy, it's been a long time since I've been able to do this, since I did this, because when I was growing up as a kid, it's kind of weird, but I've always been kind of into the news and politics and
Hmm.
stuff. And I mean, from little kid, and I would read the newspaper, and I'd have conversations with my father, and it was something I always enjoyed. So all my life, I would always be reading the New York Times, or the Leavenworth Times or something,
Hmm.
reading the paper. And then I stopped during my drinking years.
Hmm.
That wasn't going on. Sundays were horrible. I was hungry. I was sick. I was hungover. And so then I got sober, and it's like, oh, I'm reading the paper on a Sunday morning.
Right.
How nice.
One of those signs that you have a problem is when some of the activities that you used to enjoy kind of start to fall by the wayside.
Interesting. Yeah.
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 And they do.
Yeah, for sure. And you were talking earlier about growing up in a family with mental illness, and that's why it is similar, because with mental illness, if you're raising kids and you have severe mental illness, especially, your world kind of goes like this with your mental illness. So it's hard for you to be
True.
attentive to your children's needs and be attentive to their feelings. So same thing if you're like I was describing earlier, if you're drunk or hungover all the time, you're not even able to tune into what's going on around you. So it tends to have the same result on children. So
Hmm.
even my mom, she was addicted to cigarettes the whole time I was growing up. So I'm sure on
Hmm.
some level it was hard for her to give me emotionally what I needed, because she was always needing to go light another cigarette.
Hmm.
All the pictures growing up, there's a lot of pictures of me, like when I'm 3 or 4, like clinging to my mom's side while she's sitting there
Ah.
leaning against a counter smoking a cigarette.
Hmm.
And I suppose you could say the same for food for certain people, or
Hmm.
just really any personality characteristic on some level as well. That the problem that comes from it is not being able to be open to literally the child near you, and being open to their needs and having a
Yeah.
connection with them. So anything that gets in the way of that can cause a problem.
Speaking of food, that's another topic I'd like to address on this podcast. I did on the other podcast, but I look at myself. I've never been, like, grossly obese or anything. But I do, I'm overweight right now. I'd like to get back in shape and eat better. And I do find it kind of hard. I find it
Mhm.
hard to stay away from junk food and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And and I understand how there is an addiction going on there with, sugar and so forth. It does the same kind of thing to your brain that drugs do. Maybe not to the same degree, but it still affects you.
right.
But I've struggled with that all the time. It's like, mentally, I know that that it's what I'm eating is not good for me, but boy, it's really hard for me to kind of stop and control, have some sort of control over that.
It
Again, I don't
kind
know if I would call myself an addict, um, overeating addict or not,
of,
but
and what's in a name, I guess. But I have found too, my wife and I are kind of doing a low carb thing right now. And I feel like a carb calls for more carbs. Like if I was to
mm,
eat, like my wife will make these keto donuts and stuff. And
mm-hmm,
I don't want more than one. But like if I was to eat that full sugar donut, like one would
mm-hmm,
ask for another, would ask for
yep,
another on some level. So it's kind of like drinking for me that way. But I think that's everybody's different, I think, with their metabolism and how their body processes food.
yep,
But I have found that now that I'm not eating as many carbs, I don't crave near as many carbs. But when I start to eat a little bit of carbs, I want a whole lot more carbs. So it's
Isn't
yeah,
that
it's
interesting? I was just thinking, last weekend my wife and I bought some Girl Scout cookies. I
mhm.
could sit down and eat an entire box of those damn things without any problem. Could
Oh
I
yeah.
eat an entire bag of carrots?
Right,
No.
right. No. Yeah, no.
But Girl Scout cookies, no problem.
Right. Well, it's
So,
just like when I would go out to the bar, I could probably have 18 to 24 beers, but could I
right,
have eight,
right,
I couldn't have
right,
drank 18 to 24 Cokes.
right.
Well, but
Y-
if there's alcohol mixed in them, I probably could. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's there's something about the blood sugar spiking and then getting the insulin spike after that and the cycle that that creates. I think that all
yeah.
makes very good sense. I think whether this whole low carb craze right now will stick around or not, I think in general is in this culture we eat way too many carbs, just way too many.
Yep, yep. And that turns straight into sugar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Carbs,
yeah,
sugar. Yep, same
yeah.
effect.
So yeah, that'd be a nice topic to explore. And there's some really there's some good people out there. I'm thinking Dr. Vera Tarman. She has a Facebook group called uh, Food Addiction Recovery or Food Addiction Support Group. I'm Sweet Enough. Vera Tarman.
Hmm.
She's a doctor up in Toronto. She is like the director of like one of the better known rehabs up there, and she treats all sorts of addictions, but her specialty is food addiction and
Hmm.
sugar addiction. And she wrote a book called Food Junkies. Anyway, she's a wonderful person, very nice,
Yeah.
very interesting. It'd be good to have her on sometime too if she would be willing to.
I'll say this
But
about secular recovery too. It feels like everything's so defined in especially 12-step communities where like you either have to be an addict or an alcoholic or this or that. And that definition can be good for a person early on so that you identify something as an issue. But I found the longer I'm
mm,
sober and more in secular recovery, it just becomes about healthy living, right?
there you go.
Rather than just, am I a food addict or am I not? Or am I
Yeah,
addicted
why
to
does
this
that
or am
even
I not?
matter?
It's
It's
like,
like
well,
that hey, Girl Scout cookies can't be healthy for you. Can't be good
right,
to it can't be good to eat a whole box of Girl Scout cookies. And what does it matter if I'm an addict or not? In a way, it's like it almost makes it harder to do anything about because you say, "Oh, I'm an addict," so it's something that's so difficult to overcome. It's beyond my
right,
control. I've got this thing that
right,
compels me to eat an entire box of
right.
Girl Scout
Which for some people, even in 12-step communities, can become a scapegoat too, or an excuse.
Yeah,
Well, I'm just an addict. I'm just an alcoholic. Or especially if you get in meetings where people talk about, yeah, it was just a matter of time. I was born that way. I had the right genetic makeup. As soon as I took the first drink, that's exactly what I was.
yeah,
And again,
yeah.
it's great. It's great to realize that about yourself so that you can do something about it. But the label, I'm not sure. Yeah,
Mm,
I don't want to
yeah,
ever forget that I have an issue with it. But I don't know.
true.
Labeling's touchy.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, it's like if it's also kind of that all or nothing kind of thinking about it. It's like, you know, I'm really bad about that, especially when it comes to trying to get healthy and control my
Yeah.
food. It's just I go into some crazy things, but
Oh, me too.
um,
Gonna eat good this week, and then I eat bad on Thursday, and then it's like, well, I might as well eat bad Friday through Sunday and start again on Monday. Well, what's the
yeah,
magic about Monday? Those are all
yeah.
just that's some CBT work right there.
Well, talking about something that doesn't really have to do with addiction per se, but it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with this coronavirus thing and
Mhm.
if it's gonna keep people from going outdoors and so forth. Because I was thinking about that, like, okay, for work, it's not a big deal because we can work from home,
Mhm.
and they're already at work. They're saying that they've stopped international travel. They've even stopped meetings where large groups of people get together, and so I could see us working from home. And I was thinking, I do want to go to the gym again, but boy, that's a good place to get germs.
Yeah.
um I don't know where this thing's going to go.
Well, it's tricky again. It's the all or nothing thinking. You hear some people in the media are talking about how it's just a hoax, quote, a
Yeah,
hoax. I don't know who might have said
I
that,
don't I don't think it's a
but
hoax.
uh, it's again, everything gets overblown, but it already
Yeah,
seems like it's exceeded what all the other ones, the SARS and the
yeah,
H1N1, which I mean, again, it is just it's from what I hear, it's more of a strain of the cold than a flu
yeah,
necessarily.
yeah,
But
yeah. And it's
um,
dangerous. It's most dangerous for like older people, like
yeah,
in their 80s,
older and younger. I'll tell you what, though, I go to places where where I take the kids, like children's museums and stuff like that. I definitely know seems like there's less people going than there were.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I'm the way I'm made up, I'm not apt to worry about that stuff that
Yeah,
much. But again, all or nothing thinking. it's not nothing, but it's not the end of the world either. It's
Yeah.
something in between. And we should do
Yeah.
things we can to try and not, I think
Yeah.
it's good to quarantine people if
If
it
they're sick.
works, and trust scientists to do what they think is probably best for our communities. So,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
does, that fear gets stoked up, and you never know.
Yeah, I'm going to try to just keep living my life as normal and just kind of be aware of things and wash my hands and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it's kind of off topic, but it's just something that's been kind of on my mind thinking about a little bit because I
But
guess
it's
it's
a
been,
it's a good example of that all or nothing thinking that it's easy to slip
yeah,
in, and how we need to remind ourselves about the middle ground plenty.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, so we've gone for 40 minutes. That's
Oh,
pretty good. We've
yeah.
managed to find something to talk about. I hope that this has been interesting to listen to for anyone who might happen upon this. So I could imagine someday somebody is kind of bored. They're sitting at home. They're on YouTube. They're they're
Yeah.
searching for stuff. They're saying my secular sobriety. That looks interesting, and they come
Hmm.
across this podcast and they listen to it. So if that's you, I hope that you've enjoyed this. So anyway, here we go. And that's it for another episode of My Secular Sobriety. Thank you, Ben, very much. It's been nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you,
And
John.
hopefully, we're going to be back next week. And hopefully, we're going to have a guest. Now, Ben, you say you might not be on next week.
Yes, I may be going to Minnesota for the weekend, so it would probably be
Okay.
hard for me to jump on here.
Okay. So hopefully we will have Katie on next week. If not, then it'll be later in the month. She said she might be able to do it next week, and if not, she could do it sometime after March 24th. So I'll stay in touch with her and see what happens. And if we don't have a guest, I'll just jump on and do something. I'm kind of committed to doing something every week. So
Nice.
all right. Well, thanks, Ben. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, John.